A man can buy land for a handful of dollars, old Jacob Hale had told him. But some land decides for itself who gets to stay. Ethan Cole remembered those words 6 hours later, when 7 Apache riders appeared on the ridge above Black Mesa Ranch. They did not shout. They did not raise rifles. They simply watched. The evening sun burned low behind them, turning horse and rider into black shapes against a copper sky. Dust moved through the dead grass in thin ribbons. Somewhere behind Ethan, a loose shutter knocked against the cabin wall. Once, twice, then silence again. Ethan stood beside his tired bay mare with one hand resting near his belt, not on the revolver. Near it, there was a difference. He had spent most of his 36 years learning that reaching too quickly for iron usually meant a man had stopped thinking. Still, 7 armed riders staring down at a ranch he had owned since noon gave him reason to think carefully. Black Mesa had cost him almost everything. $48 in cash, a winter's wages, 2 good saddles, and the last silver watch his father had left him. The men in Dry Creek had laughed when the deed changed hands. Silas Mercer laughed loudest. "You didn't buy a ranch, Cole," he had said from beneath the saloon awning. "You bought dust." The others had joined him. Ethan hadn't. He had folded the deed, slipped it inside his coat, and ridden west. Now, looking at the ridge, he wondered if Silas knew something he didn't. The place certainly looked worthless. The barn roof sagged in the middle. Half the corral had fallen inward. The well beside the house had been covered with thick pine boards, each one hammered down with rusted spikes. No cattle tracks, no smoke, no sign anyone had lived there in years. Yet the Apache had come before Ethan had even unpacked his bedroll. One rider moved forward, only a few feet, enough for the fading light to catch the silver ornament braided into his horse's reins. Ethan straightened. The rider studied him, then the cabin, then the boarded well. His gaze lingered there longer than it should have. That bothered Ethan. A gust crossed the valley carrying the smell of sage, horse sweat, and old timber. Warmed all day by the sun, Ethan called toward them. "Evening." No answer. His voice disappeared into the distance. For nearly a minute, nobody moved. Then one of the riders turned his horse. The others followed. 7 silhouettes vanished behind the ridge as quietly as they had appeared. No warning, no threat, not a single word. Ethan watched the empty horizon until darkness swallowed it. "That clears things up," he muttered. His mare flicked one ear. Inside the cabin, the air smelled of mouse nests and dry cedar. Ethan lit a lantern and began pulling rotted boards away from the wall, making enough room for his blankets. That was when his boot struck something beneath a loose floor plank. Metal. He crouched, worked the board free, and found a small silver object buried beneath 20 years of dust. Half a bracelet. An eagle had been engraved across its face, broken clean through the middle. Ethan rubbed it with his thumb. Outside, somewhere beyond the darkened ridge, a horse gave a distant call. Then another answered. Ethan looked toward the door. He had owned Black Mesa Ranch for 6 hours. Somehow, the Apache had already known he was there, and whatever had brought them might have been waiting beneath his floor the entire time. By sunrise, Ethan Cole had decided the Apache riders were not the strangest thing about Black Mesa Ranch. The strangest thing was Jacob Hale. Ethan remembered the old man clearly now, sitting alone behind the land office desk the day before, his shoulders bent beneath a gray wool coat despite the summer heat. Black Mesa had been listed for months. Nobody wanted it. The paper described 160 acres, 1 cabin, 1 damaged barn, 1 dry well, and grazing land of uncertain value. That last phrase had made half the room laugh. Silas Mercer had leaned against the wall with his thumbs hooked into his vest. "Uncertain," he said. Hell, even the rattlesnakes moved out. More laughter. Ethan had ignored them. He had not come to Dry Creek looking for a fortune. He wanted something with a roof. Something he could call his own after 16 years of sleeping in bunkhouses, line camps, and borrowed barns. When the auctioneer asked for $40, nobody raised a hand. 35. Nothing. 30. Still nothing. Then Ethan spoke. 48. The room went quiet. Not because the offer was high, because everyone knew it was nearly everything he had. Silas turned slowly. "You serious, cowboy?" Ethan looked at the deed. "I've been accused of worse." The auctioneer accepted before common sense could catch up. But Jacob Hale did not hand over the papers right away. He studied Ethan for a long time. His eyes were pale and tired, but there was nothing weak in them. You planning to own it? Jacob asked. Or take care of it? Ethan frowned. Land. Jacob nodded. Ethan glanced toward the window, where dust rolled through Dry Creek beneath the afternoon sun. A man can't own land. Silas chuckled behind him. Ethan continued. He just gets to leave it better than he found it. Jacob's fingers stopped on the deed. For the first time, the old man smiled. Barely. Then he signed. Outside the office, Silas caught Ethan by the hitching rail. I'll give you 60 for it. Ethan looked at him. You just called it worthless. It is. Then why 60? Silas smiled. But his eyes did not. Because I hate watching a fool lose money. Ethan mounted his horse. Then don't watch. That should have been the end of it. Instead, Jacob followed him into the street. The old man placed one hand on Ethan's stirrup. If they come, he said quietly, listen before you reach for your gun. Ethan looked down. If who comes? Jacob released the stirrup, but he never answered. Now, standing inside the ruined cabin with half a silver eagle bracelet in his palm, Ethan understood one thing. Jacob had known someone would come. Maybe he had even known who. The morning light slipped through cracks in the wall and fell across the broken metal. Outside, Ethan's mare suddenly lifted her head. Her ears turned toward the eastern ridge. Ethan heard hoofbeats. One horse this time. Slow. Deliberate. He stepped onto the porch. A lone Apache woman rode toward Black Mesa Ranch. And unlike the 7 riders from the night before, she was coming straight to his door. The Apache woman stopped 20 yards from the porch. Ethan Cole did not move. Neither did she. Morning light spread across Black Mesa in thin gold bands, touching the broken fence, the sagging barn, and the dust that had settled over everything like a burial cloth. The woman sat straight in the saddle, dark hair braided behind her shoulders, buckskin worn from travel, no rifle in her hands. A knife rested at her waist, but Ethan noticed she made no effort to reach for it. That mattered. Her eyes moved over the ranch slowly. The cabin, the barn, the boarded well. Then Ethan, you are the new owner? Her English was careful, calm. Ethan leaned one shoulder against the porch post. That depends who's asking. Her expression did not change. Aiyana Redbird. He waited. She offered nothing more. So Ethan nodded toward the ridge. Friends of yours up there last night? Aiyana looked toward the hills. Family. That answer somehow made 7 silent riders feel less comforting. Ethan stepped down from the porch. He kept both hands visible. Your family usually watches strangers from a ridge after dark? Only when strangers by Black Mesa. There it was again. Not the ranch. Black Mesa. Spoken like the name carried weight. Ethan studied her face. You people seem mighty interested in a place everyone in Dry Creek calls worthless. Aiyana looked past him toward the cabin. Dry Creek calls many things worthless. Something in her voice made the words land harder than Ethan expected. He turned slightly. That was when sunlight caught the silver in his hand. Aiyana froze. Not dramatically. Just enough. Her eyes dropped to the broken bracelet. The stillness between them changed. Ethan felt it immediately. She dismounted. Slowly. Her boots touched the dirt without sound. Where did you get that? Ethan glanced at the metal. Under my floor. Aiyana stepped closer. For the first time, caution left her face. Something else replaced it. Recognition. Maybe grief. She reached toward the bracelet, then stopped before touching it. Her fingers curled into her palm. That should not be here. Seems like a lot of things shouldn't be here. Her gaze sharpened. Show me where you found it. Ethan hesitated, then led her inside. The cabin looked worse. In daylight, dust hung in the air. A mouse disappeared beneath the stove. The western wall leaned inward enough to make a man wonder how many winters it had left. Ethan pointed toward the loose plank. There. Aiyana crouched. She brushed away the dust with 2 fingers. Beneath the board, scratched into the wood, was a symbol Ethan had not noticed the night before. An eagle, split down the middle. Aiyana stopped breathing for a moment. Ethan saw it. You know what that means? She stood too quickly. No, it was the first lie she had told him. He knew because she would not look at him. Ethan stepped toward the boarded window. From there he could see the old well. What about that? Aiyana followed his gaze. Her face changed again. This time, fear. Do not open it. Ethan turned. The well. Do not let anyone open it. Why? Aiyana looked toward the road leading back to Dry Creek. A dust cloud had appeared in the distance. Several riders. Coming fast. She moved for the door. Ethan caught her words just before she stepped outside. If Mercer asks about the silver, she finally looked at him. Tell him you found nothing. Then she mounted and rode toward the eastern ridge. Ethan watched her disappear. Behind him, the loose floorboard creaked beneath the morning heat. In his hand, the broken eagle suddenly felt heavier. And down the road, Silas Mercer was coming to Black Mesa. Silas Mercer arrived with 3 riders and the smile of a man who believed every conversation had already been decided. Ethan Cole stood beside the porch steps. The broken silver bracelet was no longer in his hand. He had slipped it beneath a loose board near the stove before Mercer reached the yard. Not because he trusted Aiyana, because he trusted Silas less. The horses stopped in a cloud of pale dust. Silas removed his hat and looked around Black Mesa as though inspecting something he already owned. Settling in, Ethan glanced at the collapsed fence. Wouldn't call it settled. One of Mercer's men laughed. Silas did not. His eyes moved toward the cabin, then the well, then back to Ethan. You sleep all right? Well enough. See anybody? There it was. Too quick. Too casual. Ethan folded his arms. Couple coyotes. Silas smiled. Coyotes ride horses now. The morning seemed to narrow around them. Ethan heard leather creak beneath saddles. A fly circled the bay mare's eye. Nobody reached for a gun. Not yet. Silas stepped down. I saw tracks coming off the east ridge. Plenty of tracks out here. Apache tracks. Ethan said nothing. Silas walked toward the well. 3 steps. 4. Ethan moved in front of him. Silas stopped. That your first improvement? What? Guarding dry holes. Ethan looked at the weathered boards nailed over the well. Old place like this. A man ought to know what he's standing over. For the first time, something hard flashed behind Silas's eyes. Then the smile returned. That's exactly why I came. He reached inside his coat and removed folded papers. $500. Ethan stared at him. Yesterday, Black Mesa had been worth nothing. Today, Silas Mercer was offering more money than Ethan had held in his entire life. For the ranch. For the mistake. Ethan almost smiled. Generous. I can be. Since when? Silas's jaw tightened. The riders behind him stopped looking amused. Ethan took the papers, but did not unfold them. Why? Silas looked toward the hills. Railroad surveyors are coming through before winter. Maybe I can turn this place into grazing land. Maybe I can't. You offered 60 yesterday. I slept on it. Must have been one hell of a night. Silence. Then Silas stepped closer. His voice dropped. If you found anything in that house, it belongs with the property records. Ethan watched him. Like what? A map. The wind moved between them. Or old papers. Silas paused. Silver, maybe. There. Not proof. But close enough. Ethan handed the offer back. Haven't found anything worth $500. Silas did not take it immediately. His eyes searched Ethan's face. Then, slowly, he folded the paper and returned it to his coat. Think carefully, cowboy. I usually do. No. You usually survive. Different thing. Silas mounted. Before turning away, he looked once more at the boarded well. Long enough for Ethan to notice. Long enough to confirm what Aiyana already knew. When the riders disappeared toward Dry Creek, Ethan entered the cabin and pulled the silver bracelet from hiding. He turned it over beneath the window light. Along the inner edge, almost invisible beneath years of tarnish, were 3 scratched letters. J. H. Jacob Hale. Ethan stared at them, then at the floor, then toward the road. Because suddenly Black Mesa did not feel forgotten at all. It felt hidden. By noon, Ethan Cole was back in Dry Creek. He had left Black Mesa reluctantly. The silver bracelet was wrapped in cloth beneath his shirt, close enough that he could feel its weight whenever his horse shifted under him. Jacob Hale was gone. That was the first bad sign. The land office door stood open, but Jacob's chair was empty. Walter Briggs sat behind the desk, sweating over a ledger. Where's Hale? Walter looked up too quickly. Left. When? This morning. Where? Walter dipped his pen into ink. Didn't say. Ethan watched him. Men who told the truth usually didn't become fascinated by ink. Funny time to travel. Walter shrugged. Old men do strange things. So do rich men. The pen stopped. Ethan noticed. Then Sheriff Amos Reed entered from the rear room. He was a broad man with a gray mustache and tired eyes. The kind of sheriff who looked like he had spent 20 years keeping fools alive despite their best efforts. Heard Mercer visited you, Amos said. News travels. In Dry Creek, lies travel faster. Ethan leaned against the desk. What happened to the last man at Black Mesa? Walter's face changed. Amos looked at him. Which one? Ethan straightened. There was more than one. Silence. Outside, wagon wheels creaked past the window. Amos closed the office door. 3 owners in 19 years. Ethan said nothing. First lasted 6 months. Second lasted 11 weeks. And the third? For days. Ethan felt the silver against his chest. What made them leave? Amos rubbed his jaw. First, said his cattle wouldn't drink from the trough. Second, claimed riders watched the house every night. Apache. He never said. And the last. Amos looked toward the floor. Left everything. Everything. Horse. Saddle. Rifle. 27 head of cattle. Ethan stared at him. A man doesn't leave his rifle. No, unless he's afraid of something bigger than needing it. Walter suddenly stood. That's enough. Ethan looked at him. Walter's voice cracked. The ranch is worthless. Always has been. Ethan walked closer. Then why did Mercer offer me $500 this morning? Walter went pale. Amos turned slowly. 500. Ethan nodded. The sheriff's expression hardened. That told Ethan something important. Mercer had not told him. Ethan reached the door. Amos spoke behind him. Cole. Ethan stopped. There's something else. He turned. The sheriff lowered his voice. 15 years ago, surveyors found water east of Dry Creek. Ethan waited. Deep water. How deep? Deep enough to matter. Walter slammed the ledger shut. Amos. But the sheriff continued. The survey vanished. Ethan felt a coldness settle beneath his ribs. Who owned Black Mesa then? Amos looked at him. Jacob Hale. Outside, a shadow crossed the window. Ethan glanced through the glass. Silas Mercer stood across the street. Watching, not smiling. Ethan touched the hidden bracelet beneath his shirt. Black Mesa had never been worthless. Dry Creek had only needed everyone to believe it was. And now Ethan understood why Mercer wanted the ranch. What he still did not understand was why the Apache wanted him to keep it. By the time Ethan Cole reached Black Mesa again, the ridge was no longer empty. 7 riders had become 20. 20 became 40 before the sun touched the western hills. By dusk, Ethan stopped counting. Apache horsemen stood along the high ground in scattered lines, silent against the red sky. No war cries. No rifles raised. No one came closer. That was somehow worse. Ethan dismounted near the porch and let his bay drink from a bucket. The horse was nervous. So was he. Aiyana appeared just before dark. She rode alone down the slope and stopped outside the fence. You went to town. Ethan looked up. You people see everything? When people make enough dust. He almost smiled. Almost. Instead, he pulled the wrapped bracelet from beneath his shirt. I found Jacob Hale's initials. Aiyana's eyes moved to the silver. She said nothing. Sheriff says water was surveyed out here 15 years ago. Still nothing. Mercer offered $500 for land he called worthless yesterday. Aiyana looked toward the ridge. More riders were arriving. Ethan followed her gaze. Maybe now's a good time to start explaining. She dismounted. Her boots pressed softly into the dirt. The men in Dry Creek think we came for your ranch. Didn't you? No. Then why are there enough riders up there to make half the county's soil itself? Aiyana's expression stayed calm. Because half the county only understands numbers. Ethan studied her. And what am I supposed to understand? She pointed toward the boarded well. That. Before Ethan could answer, hoofbeats thundered from the south. Dozens this time. Not Apache. Townsmen. Silas Mercer rode at the front. Sheriff Amos Reed was beside him, looking less like a leader and more like a man trying to keep a spark from finding dry grass. Within minutes, Black Mesa was trapped between 2 groups. Dry Creek below. Apache above. Ethan stood in the middle. Silas reined in hard. You see what you've done? Ethan looked around. Bought a bad ranch, apparently. This isn't funny. No. You stopped laughing yesterday. Murmurs moved through the townsmen. Silas pointed toward the ridge. They're gathering for something. Aiyana stepped beside Ethan. Silas saw her. His face tightened. There. Proof. Proof of what? Ethan asked. That you're dealing with them. Aiyana's eyes hardened. Dealing? Silas ignored her. You sell them Black Mesa? Ethan looked at him. No, promise it. No, then why are they here? The question hung over the yard. From the ridge came the soft sound of horses shifting. Leather creaking. Wind moving through dry grass. Then one Apache rider began descending. An older man, gray braided hair, broad shoulders, no weapon in his hands. Behind him, the others remained still. Aiyana lowered her head slightly. Ethan noticed. So did Silas. The old man stopped near the boarded well. He looked at Ethan for a long moment, then spoke. Open it. Silas's face changed. Not fear. Recognition. Don't. Everyone turned toward him. Too late. The word had already escaped. Ethan looked from Silas to the well, then back again. You sure seem worried about a dry hole. Silas reached for his reins. Cole, leave it alone. Ethan walked toward the boards. Aiyana followed. Sheriff Amos moved closer. The whole valley seemed to hold its breath. Ethan wrapped both hands around the first rusted plank. Pulled. The nail screamed loose. Cold air rose from below. Then came a sound no one in Dry Creek had expected to hear from Black Mesa. Water. Moving. Deep beneath the earth. The first bucket came up cold enough to mist in the evening air. Nobody spoke. Ethan Cole knelt beside the open well, while Sheriff Amos Reed held the rope. Water spilled over the wooden rim and darkened the dust at their boots. Silas Mercer stared at it like a man watching his own grave being dug. Ethan dipped 2 fingers into the bucket. Cold. Clean. Alive. So much for a dry hole, he said. Silas stepped forward. Put the boards back. Ethan looked up. Why? That water's not safe. Aiyana almost smiled. You were willing to buy it 5 times yesterday. Silas ignored her. Around them, the townsmen shifted uneasily. Above, the Apache riders remained silent along the ridge. The old chief stood near the well, his face unreadable. Ethan lowered the bucket again. The rope descended farther than expected. 20 feet. 30. Then something struck the side. Metal. Amos heard it too. There's something down there. Silas moved. Fast. Leave it. This time Sheriff Reed blocked him. No, one word. Quiet. Enough. Ethan pulled the rope upward. It came slowly. Heavy. Water streamed from the line as something dark emerged beneath the bucket. A small iron box. Rust covered its corners. A chain had once held it to the stone wall below. Now the chain hung broken. Aiyana stopped breathing. The Apache chief closed his eyes. Silas went pale. Ethan set the box on the ground. There was no lock. Only a clasp. Inside lay oilcloth wrapped around several papers, protected from the water by wax and leather. A map, 2 deeds, and 1 document covered in signatures. Ethan recognized Jacob Hale's name immediately. Another name appeared beside it. Aiyana Redbird. Ethan looked at the old chief. The man nodded once. My father. Aiyana knelt beside the papers. She pointed to a line drawn across the map. It ran from Black Mesa beneath Dry Creek, then south toward the cattle flats. The water does not begin here, she said. Ethan followed the markings. It runs under the whole valley. Yes. Sheriff Reed took the document carefully. His lips moved as he read, then stopped. What? Silas snapped. Amos looked at him. This agreement says Black Mesa was never meant to control the spring. Silence. It was meant to protect it. The sheriff read again. Settlers. Apache families. Travelers. Livestock. Nobody could be refused water. Ethan looked toward Silas. And suddenly, every strange piece fit. The cheap ranch. The vanished survey. Jacob's warning. Mercer buying land around Dry Creek. Silas had not wanted Black Mesa because it held water. He wanted it because whoever controlled Black Mesa could choke everything downstream. Silas reached for the papers. Ethan caught his wrist. No gun. No threat. Just a grip firm enough to stop him. You knew? Silas said nothing. That was answer enough. Then the Apache chief stepped forward. From beneath his shirt, he removed a silver chain. Hanging from it was half an eagle. Aiyana took Ethan's broken bracelet from his hand. She placed the 2 pieces together. They matched perfectly. The old chief looked at Ethan. We did not come to take your land. Ethan glanced at the hundreds of riders above. Then why come? The chief looked toward the water spilling into the dust. To see what kind of man bought the promise. The promise had outlived the men who made it. That was what Ethan Cole understood as the last light slipped behind Black Mesa. The papers lay open across the old well cover. Jacob Hale's signature. Aiyana Redbird's father. A surveyor's seal. 2 families. 2 peoples. 1 spring. And standing beyond them, Silas Mercer looked smaller than he had that morning. Not poorer. Not weaker. Just exposed. Sheriff Amos Reed held the agreement beneath the lantern light. You bought every parcel south of town over the last 6 years. Silas said nothing. Amos looked at the map again. Cattle, flats, mill road, railroad approach. Ethan followed the lines. All of them depended on the same underground flow. Black Mesa sat above the narrowest point, like a hand around a throat. Aiyana stood beside the well. So that was the plan. Silas finally spoke. My plan was business. Her eyes did not leave his. Thirst is not business. A murmur moved through the townsmen. Yesterday, most of them would have laughed at an Apache woman correcting Silas Mercer. Tonight, nobody did. Silas pointed at Ethan. He owns the ranch now? Fine. Then the water is his. That changed the silence. Every face turned toward Ethan. The Apache riders on the ridge. The ranchers from Dry Creek. Sheriff Reed. Aiyana. Even the old chief. For the first time since buying Black Mesa, Ethan understood what he truly possessed. Not land. Choice. Silas saw it too. He stepped closer. $1,000. Ethan said nothing. Cash. Still nothing. $2,000. Someone behind Silas inhaled sharply. That was enough money to buy cattle. Repair the barn. Build a proper house. Enough money for Ethan Cole to stop sleeping under leaking roofs for the first time in his life. Silas lowered his voice. You wanted a ranch, cowboy. I'm offering you a future. Ethan looked at the broken fence, the dead grass, the sagging roof, then toward the ridge. Apache children had appeared behind several riders now, sitting quietly on horses with blankets around their shoulders. Farther down, men from Dry Creek stood with dust on their boots and worry in their faces. Different clothes, different languages, same dry country. Aiyana picked up the two halves of the Silver Eagle. She did not join them. Not yet. My grandfather carried his half for 40 years, she said. Ethan looked at her. Why? Because your people broke many promises. No anger. That made the words heavier. And yours? She glanced toward the old chief. We remembered this one. Silas laughed once. Bitter. So now the Apache decide who drinks? The chief finally spoke. No, he looked at Ethan. That is why we came. Not to demand. Not to threaten. To witness. Ethan understood Jacob's question at last. You planning to own it? Or take care of it? Silas held out his hand. 2,500. Ethan removed his revolver. Several men stiffened. But he did not raise it. He placed it on the well cover. Then he reached into his pocket and took out the iron key that fit the old gate beside the spring channel. He looked at Sheriff Reed. Give me a hammer. Silas's face changed. Cole. Ethan ignored him. Amos handed over the tool. One strike broke the rusted lock. The gate swung open. Water moved through the stone channel for the first time in years. Quietly, almost gently, Aiyana finally pressed the two silver halves together. The eagle became whole, and Silas Mercer understood what everyone else already had. The most valuable thing on Black Mesa had never belonged to the man rich enough to buy it. By the first hard week of summer, nobody in Dry Creek called Black Mesa worthless anymore. The heat came early. Grass curled brown against the earth. Creeks thinned into mud. 2 wells south of town failed before noon on the same day. By sunset, wagons were already moving toward Ethan Cole's ranch. Settlers came first, then cattlemen, then Apache families from the eastern ridge. Nobody had been invited. Nobody was turned away. The old stone channel beside Black Mesa ran day and night. Cold water spilled into troughs, buckets, barrels, anything that could hold it. Ethan repaired the fence, but left the gate open. That was the part people remembered. Not the deed. Not the hidden survey. The gate. Silas Mercer came on the 4th morning. Alone. No hired riders. No polished smile. His horse was white with sweat. Behind him, one of his cattle wagons had broken an axle 2 miles south. The animals had gone nearly a day without water. Silas stopped outside the gate. For a long moment, he simply sat there. Ethan was working near the trough. Aiyana stood beside the pump, filling buckets for 2 Apache children. She saw Silas first. So did Ethan. Neither said anything. Silas dismounted. Dust clung to his trousers. His collar was open. He looked toward the water, then toward Ethan. Pride can make a man walk slowly when thirst wants him to run. Silas finally spoke. My cattle need water. Ethan rested both hands on the fence rail. Silas waited. Maybe he expected payment. Maybe punishment. Maybe the same humiliation he had handed out so freely. Ethan only nodded toward the trough. Then bring them. Silas stared at him. That was all. No speech. No victory. Just permission. Later that afternoon, the cattle arrived. So did half the town. People formed a loose line along the channel. White ranchers, Apache mothers, old miners, children, men who had once refused to ride near Black Mesa now stood beneath its broken barn roof for shade. Aiyana moved along the line with a tin dipper. When she reached Silas, he held out an empty canteen. For a second, neither moved. Then Aiyana filled it. Water struck the metal with a soft, hollow sound. Silas took it. His eyes stayed lowered. He drank. Aiyana walked on. Ethan watched from the porch. Beside the well, the two halves of the silver eagle now hung together from an iron nail. No frame. No plaque. No explanation. They did not need one. Weeks later, Jacob Hale returned. Nobody knew where he had gone. Ethan did not ask. The old man stood beside the open gate and watched Apache riders pass one direction while Dry Creek wagons moved the other. You opened it, Jacob said. Ethan looked toward the channel. Seemed easier than owning it. Jacob smiled. This time fully. Then he left before sunset. Black Mesa never became the richest ranch in the county. Ethan never became a wealthy man. The barn still leaned. The porch still complained in winter. But travelers began using the place as a landmark. Not because of who owned it. Because of what happened there. Years later, when children asked why Apache families and townsfolk both drank from the same spring, the older men of Dry Creek usually grew quiet. Some remembered the day they rode out expecting war. Some remembered the man they had laughed at. Most remembered Silas Mercer standing in line with an empty canteen, and Aiyana filling it anyway. Out there, the West had enough guns. What kept Dry Creek alive that summer was something quieter. A gate left open. A promise remembered. And water given without asking what color hand held the cup.